we can interact. So the first is the chat box, and so if for whatever reason you can't hear me or you have a question, just type something in the chat box and then myself or Mark can get back to you with your question. We'll probably take, I'll kind of ask for any comments or questions as we go through, and then you know that if there's something that perhaps you've missed or you want me to comment on, you can shoot it through in the chat box and then I'll be able to see that. The other thing we'll be doing today to just get a bit of interactivity will be a few polls, just so I can see where your understanding is or what the kind of audience really needs in terms of advice. And then finally, a function we probably won't use a lot, but there's a function called hands up. So again, we might use that, but probably not today, so don't worry about that one. So, today's webinar is going to cover three main areas, and the first of those is we're going to think about how to build a great CV, and we're going to think about what are the main blocks and the bits of information that would be fantastic to have on there. Now, I appreciate if we've got people from lots of different countries on the line, this could be pretty different from your CV back home, or if you're from a country that's very similar in terms of the UK, there might not be too many surprises, but hopefully by the end you'll have a really good grasp of what UK employers want. The next part, we're going to think about what it's like to view CVs from an employer's point of view and how they really assess CVs. So not only are you going to learn how to put them together, but also how employers then look at them. And we'll be looking at a couple of three CVs today, and you'll be kind of giving your opinion on them. So we call this sort of exercise in the recruiter's shoes. So we're imagining that we're trying to sift through those CVs and get someone fantastic for the role, and that will hopefully give you insights to how recruiters will look at your CV. And then finally, we're going to think about applications. So what makes a good application, why recruiters or employers use them, and how you can tackle some of the most common questions, and that'll be looking at the competency questions, which if you've been through a recruitment process, you'll be well familiar with. So just to kick off, I want to start a bit of a poll, and it's really about thinking about your confidence levels with actually looking at UK CVs and applications. So how confident do you feel about sort of constructing them, writing about them, and if you got asked to do one right now, a UK CV or an application form, would you feel super confident? That's a 5. Would you feel, or a 1, not very confident at all, or somewhere in the middle? Be great for me just to know, and then I can share the poll results with you to see who's on the line and what they're feeling. Okay, waiting for a few more votes. Okay, so the results are in, and I'll just ask Mark to put them up for us. Okay, so we've got an interesting spread today. So it seems like there's a few folk who are pretty confident that they've got this one wrapped up. 4s, very nice, and then the majority around a 3. Some obviously confident, perhaps you've written a CV, or perhaps you're quite confident with your CV back home, but it might be how to turn it to the UK market. Okay, hey, that's great. Thanks for letting me know that. That gives me a good steer of where people are. Okay, so the first really bit of the session is thinking about how to write a great UK CV. Now, CVs really are there to get you the interview or the first round interview. So many people think that CVs are to get you the job, but actually there's going to be a lot more steps in the process between getting a job than just simply handing in a CV and them shaking your hand and giving you lots of money, hopefully. So yeah, it's to get the interview, so you've got to do enough just to pique their interest, to give them a really good idea that you match the kind of skills and the kind of experience that they're looking for. Now, it's really important that you back up your claims. I see a lot of CVs that sort of say things like, oh wow, I'm a fantastic person, I'm a great problem solver, I'm a leader of people, trust me, I'll be fantastic in the organization. And the issue is there's no evidence to back up that claim. So just as you're doing your studies, if you write an essay with no quotes, no references, there's going to be a problem. And it's the same with your CV. You've got to evidence exactly what you're doing and what you're claiming on your CV. We're also going to think about the two levels of focus when it comes to CV writing. The first is, does a CV look good at a glance? When you just scan it down, does it look nice and clean and tidy and fresh? But then when you go into the detail, does it actually stack up? Are there those nice examples to qualify what you're saying? Now, it's really important. In the UK, it's a bit strange. I know in different countries around the world, there's quite a formulaic standard of how to produce a CV. In the UK, there are suggested areas you might want to include, but exactly how you do it, how you lay it out, it's a bit up to you. I said there are a few advice and guidelines, and I'll be going through those. But if you want to title something a little bit differently, or if you want to add in a little section that other people don't have that you think shows yourself in a good light, you go for it, that's no issue. So be aware there's many different CVs out there. If you look around for examples or see friends, you'll see a whole load of different things. Okay, let's run through some CV basics. The first thing to say is that most CVs are 2 pages, so that's 2 sides of A4. So if you've got one sheet of paper, you can cover both sides of it. Now, the only caveat would be if you are going into academia, then it can be quite a lot longer. Is it going to include different things on there? And I'll briefly run through those at the end. The other caveat or the other change is if you are going into, say, banking or management consultancy, something like that, often a 1-page CV is what they like to see. Okay. Now, just before we roll on to the different categories, I just wanted to run a little poll and get a sense of what you think, some of the elements you think should be on a CV. So I'll get Mark to put that poll up. So a little poll for you, which of these things should be on your CV? Okay, and you can tick as many as you like, and so I can see what you think might go on a UK CV. Okay, a couple more people yet to vote. Okay, that's grand. Right, we'll put the results up and see what people think. Okay, so at 60%, so a lot of folk out there think that nationality should be on there. Very high again is age, gender, yep, and then a photo, and then marital status. Okay, so the good news is you're on the call with us today. The bad news is that pretty much all of those do not appear on a UK CV. So it's great you're with us today and we're having this conversation because UK CVs wouldn't really have these details. And the big reason for that is all those characteristics are personal to individuals, and so UK employers by law cannot discriminate against you for being in any of those kind of categories. So let's imagine if you put your age on the CV, perhaps they could be taken to court for not accepting someone who was, say, too young or too old, or perhaps if I don't know, they take on 10 male employees and you put your female, perhaps you could take them to court for that. So in the UK, all those personal information, most of it you don't put on your CV. Now I know that's very different to a lot of countries around the world. A lot of Europeans put on, say, a photo, just not needed, or in other countries you have marital status, again not needed. The only thing that some people might put if, for example, you usually don't even write your visa status either, but if you think that it would be helpful for the employer to know, for example, if your name, because obviously they still got your name on the CV, looks like you come from a country that you'd need, say, a visa, but in actual fact you are, say, of dual citizenship, and in fact that you wouldn't need a visa because maybe your dual citizenship is, say, it could be China and Germany, for example, and then that German citizenship would actually entitle you to work in the UK. But usually, all those characteristics, not needed. Okay, so the first section I want to talk about is personal details. Now, having said that we don't want to see all those things I just mentioned, what we do want to see is your name. And it's a bit strange because often people can tell where you're from by your name anyway, but regardless, that should be the top of your CV. What we don't need on the CV is something like curriculum vitae or CV on the top of your CV. We want your name. Directly under your name, we're going to want your address details, and be aware that we'll want your address in the UK, but if you think you're going to go and not really use that one because you're going home for a long period of time, it might be useful to put your one back home as well. Other things we're going to want will be, as well as the address, some kind of telephone number so they can get hold of you. And again, if you've got 2 mobile numbers, put them down, and then an email address that they can reach you on. And that really is all your personal details that you're going to need. So name, address, telephone number, and email. Again, when we get to the end of this basic section, we'll have a time for questions. But if you've got particular comments, then Mark is feverishly typing away, answering lots of people. Okay, now the next section, which is a kind of an optional one, is the career profile or personal profile. Now, this is often a little introduction to you, and some people do this really well, and some people do it really badly. Now, I'm going to leave that one for the moment because when we have a look at the example CVs later, you'll start to understand what makes a great profile and what doesn't. I'll give you a clue. If the profile has no evidence in it, then it's not a great one. So if it goes something like, I'm a student from the University of London and I'm a great team player, I'm enthusiastic, I love to solve problems in creative situations. Lovely, use of words there, but unfortunately no good on a CV because it doesn't evidence any of those skills you've talked about. But we'll come back to that. Okay, the first major section for most people's CV after their personal details and possibly a profile is going to be education. Now, education will always start with your most recent education and then work backwards. So for you guys on the call today, it's most likely to be your undergrad at one of the University of London colleges, or perhaps your master's or even your PhD. That's going to be your first part of your education. Then you're going to work backwards, and so it might be the school or the college that you went to for your exams you did at 18 before you came to university, and then some employers want to see even further back than that. So a lot of UK companies will want to know the school you were at when you're 16, you're 18 as well. But again, based on what the employer wants, you're going to put down your CV. If they're not interested, neither are you, leave it out. That'd be my advice there. Now, a few things to say. Education-wise, you want to put where you studied. You're going to want to put the dates you were there and preferably the grades that you actually achieved. And that's pretty important. You might also, for the most recent study experiences, either at PhD, Masters or undergrad, you might want to put down some relevant modules to the job you're applying for, and then even some key skills that you gained from that experience. So it could be research skills and then an example, presentation skills an example, teamwork an example. But when we look at the different CVs later, you'll kind of see how that one looks actually on paper. Okay, the next big one will be employment history, and this is a section which can include quite a lot of different kind of aspects. So it could be full-time paid work, it could be part-time paid work, it could be voluntary work, i.e. for free, and that could be with a charity, it could be a very short experience, maybe one day or a couple of days, or it could be you know, for weeks or weeks, months at a time. What's important there? You want the name of the employer, you want the time that you spent with them, the dates, and you then want to list your what your role was, so your job title, and then there's a couple of things you might want to cover after you've given the headlines. You want to think about what were the core duties of the role, what were the core kind of components or parts of the role that you did, the sort of things you were asked to carry out while you're there, the duties, and then you might want to think about the skills that you gained. And again, we'll look at that later, how to lay that out, but if you think you gained, let's say, research skills there, or financial business awareness sort of skills, you then want to note that down and then put a really nice example. And again, when you see the sample CVs, you'll get how to do that. Okay, moving on. Some people will have a skills profile. Now, I'm not a massive fan of these, but you can do it this way. So far, I've been saying put the relevant skills to the relevant bits of your CV. So let's imagine if you gained a skill during education, put it in your education section. If you gained it during your employment, put it in your employment. Some people, again, it's up to you, they put it all together in one block. Now the advantages is it's all there and easy to see. The disadvantages is the employer might not be too clear about where you gained that skill from. Again, optional. Now another area which causes lots of confusion, and again can be quite particular to the UK market, employers here want to know a little bit about you outside your studies. So not only do they want to know that you studied history at King's or theology at Heathrop or something at SOAS, they want to know what exactly you did outside. So it might be what societies you're involved in, what charity work you did, if you've done lots of traveling, if you've been part of a sort of a team, or you set up a financial, it could be a project or a program of some sort, or perhaps you trade your own account, or you're great at some sort of, let's say, environmental initiative. But anything that you've done that you think it's not academic and just shows you've got a commitment to something. So sporting achievements will often go in this section, or regular commitment to a group or a said society. Lastly, we're going to think about references. Now these are, I would say, optional. If you're running out of space in your CV, you can simply write the line references available on request, and that's perfectly acceptable to any employer. If, however, you've got amazing references and you want the person who's reviewing your application to see them, then of course you can put them on, and if you've got time and space, then it's a good thing to do. Particularly if, let's imagine you're applying for a master's and you have some well-known academics in the field who have endorsed you and are your references, then it might be a nice idea to put them on. But if you're running out of space, you can simply put references available on request. Okay, so before we sort of move on from sort of CV basics and actually start to have a look at some CVs, any questions that people want to ask, or anyone want to clarify what I've said so far? Okay, so we've got a questions about written references for an employer. Written reference form from a former employer is currently not available. The company's liquidated. Yeah, that's. I think that's a really interesting one. Obviously, if you for jobs, they'll often say, look, can you give us the references for your last academic position? And it can be often two references from your last academic position, and then it potentially could be a personal reference, which could be any kind of, I guess, a friend, but it would need to be someone of standing. Let's imagine it could be someone who knows you, like a family friend, who give a character reference that also has a professional capacity. So let's imagine they're a local doctor to you, or they might be a local lawyer, or they could be a teacher, or someone who can write something down. They say, yeah, we just kind of respect what this person says. The other references from previous employers. So if you are employed by a company and they can no longer give you a reference, then you're just going to have to put another referee down, so maybe even the employer before that, or just simply explain, look, this company is now liquidated or it's gone out of business, and that's something I just can't give. And then they might ask you to provide another academic reference, and that's quite normal. But I would say references are really something after they've decided they like you and want to take you on, and it's just checking you're not, a sort of secret axe murderer or someone who's going to take them down. So unless there's big sort of secrets in your past, I wouldn't worry too much about references. They are just a rubber stamp of hopefully what they found out in the interview process. Okay, let's see if there's any other things, any other questions going through. Okay, lots of questions. Okay, so someone says, what about an exchange program? Should I list it as education? Yeah, absolutely. So an exchange program shows a whole host of skills. So it proves that you can work in a multicultural environment. It says you're a quick learner. It says you've got language skills. Yeah, absolutely. That would definitely want to go down in the education section. Great question. Okay, so a question here. The Russian system of education is different from the one in the UK, and at high school we have lots of subjects, unlike the UK. Therefore, okay, should you give all 15 grades or only the most relevant ones? Yeah, good question. So what happens if your education system doesn't fit neatly into the UK choices? What I would tend to do is have a look at if you have to do an application, often you will, you can always check to see what they're asking for in the application form, and then that would indicate what you might want to put in your CV. The other thing you can do is ring up the company and say, look, really impressed with your company, would love to apply. I've obviously got some great results to share with you, but I don't want to overload you with lots of things you don't want to see. Can you let me know exactly what you'd like? And that's a perfectly fine thing to do. Just ring up their human resources department, their HR department, and they'll be able to clarify that with you. If you're not sure and you're just writing to a company that doesn't know you and there's no way to find that out, I would probably, if it's when you were 16, maybe write an overall grade. You can write 15 grades achieved at between A and C or something like that, or you could even say this many A's, this many B's, this many C's, this many D's, etc. No issue. And if it's a different system, say a numerical system, you could put average grade, 7.5, 6.8 or whatever it is. And then they want more, they can come back to you. Okay, anything else before we go on? We've got a question about, can you include languages that you speak? Yeah, absolutely. Definitely want languages on the CV, and depending on how important they are for the role, they might come right up in that profile right at the beginning. Okay, so another good question about what happens if you've got lots of work experience. Do you still put the education section first? The answer to that is probably not. So you really want to put the most relevant section for the job first. So if it means, let's say you're doing an academic position and you just finished a PhD, and that research experience is the most relevant thing you have to do with an academic postdoctoral position you're going for, then potentially education might come first. If it's a case you're going into a job in museums, and yes, you did a museum studies masters, but quite a while ago, then that 10 years work experience you've got in the sector is probably going to come first. So I think use your judgment, read the job descriptions you're going for, and then sort of adapt accordingly. But most of the time, if you've got substantive work experience in the area you're going for, I would probably want to see that first. Okay, perhaps a final question. Awards and scholarships, question, should we put those on? Yeah, absolutely. That'd be, you could even do a separate section if you wanted to. And that would be it would really highlight that you're a candidate of distinction. So I'd definitely do that. Okay, we'll have more time for questions at the end, but we'll move on for now. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to think like an employer. It's all very well writing these CVs yourself and thinking they're marvelous. Most people think their own CV is pretty good, but we really need to know how employers view them and how employers select the ones that they want to keep and how they decide which ones to put in the bin. And you can see here that this lovely employer in our photo has a lot of paperwork to contend with. And when we've done research, we found that employers spend about 10 to 15 seconds looking at a CV before they decide to either bin it or continue to read the rest. So you really only have about 10-15 seconds to capture their interest. So if you thought they were going to read it cover to cover, you're just not going to find that, because these employers will have hundreds to look through and yours needs to stand out. So what we're going to do is we're going to think about a job description which is going to help us think what the employer looks for. So I'll just show you this now, and I want you to get into the mind of being a recruiter yourself. And the particular job that we're going to be recruiting for is this one. So the job is for the UK Foundation for Education Research. We're looking for someone to fill this contract for 1 year. Now, the role is an opportunity has arisen for a researcher to carry out qualitative research. The focus of the research is to understand more about the impact of technology in relation to raising of educational standards, skills development, and social inclusion. So a researching role, and that's really this is a very simple job description, but the key is the personal specification, and this is the employer's way of signifying or telling what they really want from the candidate. So we've got 5 bullet points there. The first being educated minimum degree level, an experience of conducting qualitative research. The next point would be interpersonal skills, including listening, the ability to empathize, persuade, and use their diplomacy skills. Next point, the ability to present clearly, both orally and in writing. Then we've got project management skills and ability to work to deadlines. And finally, an interest in technology is desirable but not essential. Now, as recruiters now, or everyone on the call now, I'm going to show you 3 CVs, one after the other, and I want you to think about, would you employ this person? And you're going to spend about, first look, 10 to 15 seconds looking at each CV, and then I'm going to ask you which one you would hire. Now, I don't want you just to do that just from kind of personal preference. I want you to think about this personal specification. These are the things that you're really looking for in the role. So as a recruiter, you're thinking, do they have a minimum education to degree level? Do they have experience of qualitative research? Do they have great listening and empathy and diplomacy skills? Can they present? Can they project manage? And do they have an interest in technology? So if those things come through on the CVs, you're going to think about hiring this person. If they don't, you're just going to move on. So let me show you the first CV, and just remember those 5 bullet points, okay? So CV1, have a look for sort of 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and then we'll move to CV2 and 3, and then we'll take a vote. So just have a little look at this one. Okay, hopefully you've got had a little glance of that one. Remember, you're a busy recruiter. You're not going to spend long on these CVs. They've only got a few seconds to impress you. Okay, let's have a look at CV2. CV2, here it comes. Let's take a look at that one and see what you think. Okay, let's have a look at CV3. And remember, you're trying to look for those 5 sort of bullet points. Think about project management, thinking about like qualitative research, that diplomacy and negotiation skills, and the interest in technology. Okay, that's enough time on CV3. We're now going to put it to a vote. So if you could vote which CV, just having a brief look, remember you're a recruiter, you're hungry, you are time limited. Which one would you go for, CV1, 2 or 3? We're going to think about why in a moment. Okay, a few more you have to vote. Okay, results coming in. So it looks like we've got an overwhelming majority looking at CV2, a few folks CV1, and a few more thinking CV3. Okay, let's have a look at those in a little bit more detail. And what I want you to do is in the chat box, if you could just let me know what you think is good and what you think is bad about these CVs in turn. So let's have a look at CV1 first of all. What kind of things do you think are good? What do you think is bad? Or any questions you want to ask about CV1? Okay, thanks for everyone who letting us know that the screen was blank. That's very kind. So yeah, let's now have a look at a little bit more detail, just so we can pull out what we thought was good and what we thought was bad about each of these CVs, and then hopefully by sharing this kind of information, you can make your CV fantastic. So just in the chat box, write what you particularly liked or disliked about CV1. Okay, got some nice comments coming through. So yes, CV1 doesn't particularly organise. Yes, thank you for that one. I think that's true. It's not that concise. Okay, a bit complicated. Yeah. I've got some people think it's possibly a clear layout, and the information was quite easy to read. So that's, and then I've got others who think, you know what, no, I didn't like the layout at all, and it was quite hard yet to read through all the kind of text to really find out what on earth they were talking about. We've got comments about CV1 doesn't have the required qualifications, and the work experience is irrelevant. Yeah, that's a fair point. The visual impact is not there, and too much unimportant information about their sort of hobbies and interests, things like that. Okay, yeah, thank you. That's some really interesting comments on CV1, and I would tend to agree with those. So he's also got quite an unprofessional email address. Talk to the bishop man. He's got his nationality on there. He's got his age on there. And the career profile is it's quite sort of general. It's not really selling him. And then there's a massive paragraph during his education, which no one's really going to get to read. And then, yeah, just fairly, I guess it's conversational rather than selling him. And then a few points, massive amount of bullet points on his leisure activities. Obviously, he enjoyed those. Okay, let's have a look at CV2. And again, just on CV2, just let me know what you think, what you like, and what you don't like about CV2. And I know a lot of you thought if you're going to take one of these three, it might be CV2. And I know it's not a perfect CV, but what did you like and what did you not like about CV2? Okay, a few comments coming through. We've got, okay, a nice layout. It addresses lots of the points on the job description, and that's clearly laid out. So some of the highlights the relevant qualities needed. So we can see problem solving, persuasion, research, report writing, project management. Yeah, lots of comments on that, so very easy to see, good headings. It's interesting because there's actually a lot of text on the screen there, far more than CV1, but by highlighting the relevant skills to the job description, it does make it more accessible to the reader. Lots of comments on that. We've got, yeah, good experience. The employment section is divided into the relevant areas. So he's got qualitative research experience, then technology experience, and then other, you know, commercial experience. And again, that means that he hasn't just sent the CV to everyone, he's tailored it for that role. Okay, a few other comments. Nice headings, well laid out. And reflects the personal specifications. Absolutely. So if you were looking to put together a CV, this wouldn't be a bad one to kind of start as a base with. So we'll obviously we'll send you the slides, or if you wanted to just take a snapshot, you could always press your print screen key now, and then you'd have a just a little record of this CV. I don't think it's perfect by any means, you know, I wouldn't say this will fit for all roles, but as a general template, it's not bad. So if we look at a few details, the personal profile, it's tailored to the role. and it's giving evidence. So is the UCL humanities graduate with qualitative research experience in relation to social policy issues. And then he talks about the experience that he's got, and then he talks about his experience in project management, and it's all the time giving those nice qualified relevant experience to back up what he's saying. Then through his education, briefly he talks about what the degree is about and then highlights the key skills that the employer wants to see. So he's made a degree in geography relevant to this role, even though at a first glance you might not think that would be tailored in such a way, but he's managed to really make it fit the job, which is fantastic. Again, he's written about his qualitative research skills, technology experience, and because I said in the beginning, you can tailor your CV and you can change it. That's exactly what this candidate's done. So some nice kind of things. Then leisure activities, he's kept that interesting, but not too extensive like candidate 1. Okay, let's have a quick look at 3, and then any thoughts on CV 3, either good or bad, things you like, things you didn't like. Okay, lots of comments coming through. Okay, so some of the headings in the middle make it a little difficult to follow. Yeah, fair enough. There seems to be a lot of different opinion on that one. So some folk think it's easy to navigate, other people think it makes it hard to navigate. So again, we're getting a bit of personal preference in there. I mean, the sections are relatively clear, but it certainly is potentially a distracting style. But again, I don't think there's a massive problem there. But let's have a look at some other comments. Okay. Hard to distinguish the relevant details. Now that's a really good point. So you can't quite kind of see what exactly this person, how they would relate to the job. If we dug into it, possibly, but it's pretty vague and pretty hard to understand. What I would say is this is quite typical of the kind of CV that they've sent to every single firm they've applied to, and it will say exactly the same thing with no tailoring at all. And this is pretty commonplace. So if you're sending the same CV to all employers, then this would be a good lesson for you. It doesn't look great, does it? Okay, any other comments? Okay, yeah, it doesn't include the skills and different work experience. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think you captured the main points there. I think what's really important here is to note that if you don't tailor it, it just looks a bit of a mess, and you don't get a sense that this person would fit the role that you're recruiting for. So key point, recruiters want an easy life, they want skills highlighted easily, they want to see them quickly, and so do likewise on your CV. Okay, so just to wrap up the CVs section, you want to make sure you're targeting the CV by looking at the job description and writing tailored points. You want to think about the presentation, you want to think about how it looks, does it come across cleanly, is it easy to access, and does it look smart? And then finally, a logical structure. If you think they want to see research experience, that's going to come really high up your page. If your education is the most recent experience you have, that'll come first. Or if you've got substantive, you've got a lot of work experience, that might then come and actually come above your education section. So make sure whatever the employer wants to see, you've got that first on your CV. If you want more, just before we jump into applications, if you want more on any of these topics, you can go to the website called Careers Tagged, which is the online careers library here at the University of London. So if you can just Google Careers Tagged, it'll ask you for your ID and password from your college, and then you can access lots of sort of how-to guides on application forms, CVs, and all the rest of it. Okay, let's have a quick poll. Why do employers use application forms? Let's see what you think. Okay, a few more people left to vote, and then we'll close that poll. Okay, let's have a look. So, why do people use it? It's easier to compare candidates. Yeah, great, fair process. They like to annoy candidates with longer forms. Yeah, potentially. What is interesting actually is that having an application form does deter unsuitable candidates, because it does take quite a lot of effort to fill one of these forms. But really, they use them because it allows them to compare lots of candidates, the same questions, makes it a fair process. And for example, a CV, the issue with the CV is you can write it in lots of different ways and you don't get a sense of their motivation. And so it's hard to assess someone on that basis. So applications, let's have a little look at this. Now, I wanted to show you just one example to give you the sense of probably 50, maybe even 70% of application questions, and that comes down to competency questions. Now, these are questions that they're looking for you to describe and demonstrate a skill that they want to see as part of the job description. So this is a typical competency question, and it goes something like this. Describe how you have achieved a goal through influencing the actions or opinions of others. What were the circumstances? What did you do to make a difference? How do you know the result was satisfactory? So there's really 3 questions there, and it's 110 words, and that's what you have to answer it. So how do you achieve a goal through influencing the actions of others? What was the circumstance? How did you make a difference? How did you know it worked? Well, let me show you someone's first effort. So at BAE in 2014, I was asked if I could assist in the development of a new website. I was asked for my opinion as a fresh pair of eyes and then joined the team developing the site. I had a number of ideas, including incorporating a pop-up menu of up-and-coming events. Some of the team were skeptical of this idea due to a growing user backlash against pop-ups. I showed them some design ideas and eventually they agreed to give it a try in the events section. I then designed the pop-ups to promote various events and some of them have been used. Okay, so this answer I would say is okay, but not great. And it's not great for the following reasons. When he talks about the result that was achieved, it's sort of, you know, some of them have been used. When he talks about his persuasion skills, he just writes, eventually they agreed to give it a try. It's not particularly dynamic. I don't get a sense of really how he persuaded them. It's a pretty flat answer. Right, let me give you an example of how you might go about structuring this type of question so then you can write a better answer, and then I'll show you that answer. So competency questions are really asking you three things. Firstly, they're asking you what is the background or setting to this story, and that's the context, okay? And that should be quite brief, 15 to 20% of your answer. You're then going to go into the action and really describe what did you do. So don't talk about what the team did, but what you particularly did to carry out and demonstrate that action. And then finally, you're going to think about what was achieved as a result of you doing these actions to demonstrate that skill, and that's then the result. Now the little acronym CAR, or the slightly longer one called STAR, but I prefer the 3-point CAR answer. So if you apply this context, action, and result, you get an answer something like this. Okay, remember he's only got 110 words. So at BAE Summer Placement in 2014, I assisted in the development of a new website. I took it upon myself to conduct an audit of similar sites and presented my findings to the development team, recommending the use of pop-ups to advertise forthcoming events. Mindful of industry skepticism regarding their use, I researched available data on the area, prepared visual design ideas, and presented my case. Despite their initial concerns, I persuaded them to allocate funds for an initial trial period. The resulting click-through rates were encouraging, and the pop-ups are now a permanent addition to the website and have proved a successful way of promoting attendance at our events. So I hope you can see he sets out the context. He then talks about what he particularly did to fulfill the skill they're looking for, and then talks of a clear result. And he's used lots of those kind of action verbs, resulting, promoting, persuaded, researched, and that's a good kind of methodology to use just to show you are really on the ball. So with applications, a few tips for you. It's really important to know your employer. So a big set of questions, apart from the competency questions, are going to be the motivation questions. Questions like, why do you want to work for us? Now, to answer that, you're going to struggle if you haven't looked at their website. You might have even wanted to speak with particular employees that work there or people that work in similar firms within the industry. You might also want to go to recruitment events or careers fairs and chat to people there. You might, if your university has an alumni database, get in contact with them. And if you really want to do your homework, you could read the company annual report or some of the trade press or associations for that particular sector. When you're preparing, you've got to know what they're looking for, and so that comes back to job description, personal specification, and all your evidence in your CV, in your application is going to be tailored to that. But you've got to show, you know the role. Now, once you know all that, it's then working out which example would demonstrate that skill best. So you go to your CV and you might want to select different things off it for the application form. And just give lots of different examples, so you're not always coming back to that one experience you had on your undergrad program in your second year when you were captain of the swim team. Use different examples for different qualities. Okay, before we launch our sort of final poll, I just wanted to take any other questions that people wanted to ask, and we'll try and take a few of those. Okay, questions coming through. Is a cover letter necessary, and what should it contain? Great question there. What I'm going to say is when I gave the information to careers tagged, if you go on careers tagged and then just put in the tag cover letters, you will get some guides that will tell you all about how to write them. If you want a very quick steer, you want to introduce yourself and talk about the job you're applying for. You want to talk about why you're applying to that firm particularly, giving detail. That's the next section. After that, you want to describe how you fit that role, i.e. how you fulfill the requirements on the job description, and then simply round it up. So it's those kind of 4 parts: intro, why them as a firm, why you as a candidate, and then conclude. Okay, what about employers that requires certain hours that are outside your visa restrictions? Yeah, so in the holidays, for most people on a tier 4, you can work unrestricted, but obviously in term time, it's usually 10 or 20 hours. I think you've got to be quite upfront about that. You don't want to break the law and get kicked out of the country. That wouldn't be a great result. So I think just pick a different job. If they want, 25 hours, you can only work 20. Either ring them up and talk to them about that, or don't apply, I guess. They're your 2 options, but I wouldn't start a job, not really tell them, and then they get in trouble later. That wouldn't be a great way to get a reference at the end. Okay, so a question about academics. If you're going for, say, a research position, how do you show you're an outstanding researcher? So it might be through publications, it might be through presentation at conferences, it might be through posters, it might be through your referees. They might kind of comment on that as well. It could be I guess in your describing your research, what kind of lengths you went to, what kind of detail. If you're sort of further down the kind of spectrum in terms of what you did at undergrad and masters, it might be what grade you got. If you're more senior, then yeah, you're going to be looking at publications as their or the funding that you've received for your work. They're the kind of key things I'd go for. Okay, is it better to email a CV or post them? I would probably go, it's completely up to you, but online I would say is fairly normal. But again, if you've got some fancy letter-headed paper and you think they respond well, you could always give it a whirl. But I think most people now it would be email, because they've got to forward it on probably to someone rather than taking copies. If you've got lots of job experience, oh, okay, you don't have a lot of job experience. Okay, I was going to say, not really a massive problem. You've got lots of job experience. If you don't have a lot, I would suggest you go into university, you go and see your careers advisor and say, hey, this is a sector I'm looking to get into. How do I get work experience? And I think I want to say that on a broader point, if anything's been raised today where you think, okay, I see that my CV now needs some work, or applications are going to need a bit of work, go in and see your university careers consultants. All the University of London colleges have excellent careers services. Most of the appointments you now book online, so just simply Google for your careers service. There'll be a way you can book an appointment, and then you can book to see an advisor for either a short discussion over your next career move, or you can bring in an actual application and get them to check it for you, or a CV or a cover letter. So can't advise that strongly enough. If no one looks over it, it will probably, as you've seen, you might think it looks good, but what will an employer think? And make use of those consultants who see literally hundreds, if not thousands, over the year. Okay, question about consultancy jobs. Is it necessary to compress a one-page CV? I would probably go back to them. A lot of consultancies do want to see a one-pager. See if you can go to careers fairs and get a general sense, or if you're applying to one particular one, just ask them. I think that's a fine thing to do. Okay, if a couple of questions about providing evidence, I would, for different roles you've done, if you're struggling to find the right evidence to fill the criteria, come in and ask a careers consultant. Come in with your questions about your CV. They can sit down and look at the documentation with you. Okay, we're going to take our final poll, which is really about having learned a little bit more about UK CVs and applications. Do you feel a bit more confident now to actually tackle writing those CVs and applications? So let's have a look. Let's take a vote. Okay, a few more people left to vote. Thank you for those who already have. Just while waiting for the poll, we've got a question about switching from an academic position to the civilian world and how do I translate job experience. That is going to be quite a, I would say, a task that needs careful time and attention, and you'd need to get a job description of the job you're interested in going for, get it with your CV, bring it into the careers service and just say, look, this is my issue, I have great academic experience, I'm a great researcher, I now want to do this, how can I show my experience in the light of this new opportunity? And those advisors, that's what they do all day, every day, they look to match your skills with the job description. So great question. I would say that needs a full kind of session with a careers advisor. All these sessions are free. You can simply book online and go and see your relevant advisor. Right, let's have a look at the poll in terms of what people are feeling now. Okay, so very nice. So we had mainly threes earlier. Now we're creeping into mainly fours, 62%, with a few of you guys doing very, very nicely with a 5. So very kind of confident about CVs and applications. Okay, so the last thing I really want to show you is if you'd like more advice as international students, there is a whole series of resources for you, and as well as looking at, say, things like Careers Tagged, which is going to have loads of different resources, there's international specific blog site and a Facebook site. And these are run out of a group called International Futures. Now, International Futures is a group of careers consultants and information officers and employer engagement employees around the University of London who have a special focus on international students. And we run a blog and, I said, a Facebook page. And so anything that we think would be useful for international students, we're going to put up on those two sites. And I've just put the links there at the bottom. And particularly if you just want some, I guess, advice, you can always, as I said, get in touch via the blog or via Facebook, and we'll be happy to come back to you. But as I said, if you want that, if today's is kind of piqued your interest and you think, look, I'd love to take this step further, go in and see your careers advisor in your careers service, and they can look at your CV and tell you how to tailor it. Now, I said earlier, we're going to send this recording out to those who participated today and also the slides, so don't worry about getting hold of those. And again, if you've got any questions, any comments for us, then you can email us on the feedback form that will come around. And Mark might be on the sort of chat box for a little while longer, and he can probably answer some of your questions. Okay, but for now, it's goodbye from myself and Mark from King's, and we look forward to perhaps seeing you at a career service, one of our career services soon, but have a great summer and best of luck with whatever you're doing next.